In his book, Between Two Age, Zbigniew Brzezinski, former National Security Councilman, former President Carter, declared that technotronic age means a society controlled by an elite without the traditional values. Therefore, soon, the almost continuous surveillance of every citizen will be possible, and update every day the most personal information, dockets and files subject to immediate recovery by authorities. The chief of Cyberwar operations in Israel, Amos Joklo, explained that in each century since the Industrial Revolution, the art of war has improved. The armed forces and navy were necessary for the army to be imposed. In the 19th century, in the 20th, the Air Force as a massive war instrument. In our century, new dimensions of war have been developed with cybernetics. And it has at very high speed and with there's a way to change the view or the vision of war. We're talking about physical destruction of real world through informatics applied to geopolitics and war in the cyberspace as a place of dispute and of quotes of power and elites. Cyberspace and dispute of power in the 21st century is our critical move today. Welcome to this program. Last December 1st, to the side of the G20 meeting in Argentina, when, while traveling towards Latin America, Oisu was arrested in Canada after several reports of human rights violation. The Supreme Court of British Columbia accepted a bail of 10 million Canadian dollars. She will have to appear in court on February 6th, and she is accused to violate the sanctions imposed by Washington in Iran. China has said that it expects a quick resolution and says that Huawei has observed all laws in the 170 countries where it has activities. That seems an isolated fact has lots to do with the war we're talking about, and it seems that we have at Portas a multidimensional problem. China urges Canada to correct its mistakes immediately, free Chinese citizens who were illegally arrested, guarantee their legitimate rights, and urges the United States to repeal the order for arrest. The United States and Canada can still presume of respecting the state of law. In my opinion, this is not different from the modern version of the new emperor's clothing. It doesn't matter the excuse they use or legal excuse they use to cover it. They are writing in capital letters their ignorance for facts and the empire of law. They have become the clowns of the world. Geopolitics that identifies interests and conflicts of power between actors and key territories moves in 4 dimensions: air, land, underground, where we know there are minerals, and sea. In these 4 traditional dimensions, it is where our country's disputes are materialized. We now have to add a 5th dimension, which is cyberspace, an entity that is not precisely neutral and ahistoric. We add this definition and others that are related and that will help us understand this critical move today. Cyberspace, understood of the entire network space where there's also sovereignty. It is the deep web. It belongs to the nation state. And new ways of organizing power is created that reproduce asymmetric power relations that is also conceived as the territory where multiple actors dispute power. They propose strategies, and disputes are materialized in protected information networks. Cyberwar is the group of actions of a state to penetrate the digital networks of another state to cause damage, alterations, annul, or damage informatic systems. It is also called an asymmetric war because of its low cost and high destruction capacity. The goals include attack the bank, communication systems. They are experts in informatics and telecommunications. Electronic terrorism or cyber terrorism is related to technological uses, information communication, information systems to promote terror among the population, attack networks, and organize terrorist group activities. Their interests include economic, political, and religious matters. A hybrid war is a new type of asymmetric confrontation. A determined disinformation. The focus is an exploitation of social conflict until it becomes a quick resolution of war with military intervention in its last phase. The author of this strategy is the chief of state of the Russian armed forces, who said that it is now increasingly to use a non-military, political, economic, and other measures that would be based on military forces. Cybersecurity or information security technology is a composition of national digital defense, the protection of computers and servers, cell phones, electronic systems, networks, and strategic data for malicious attacks. I would like to share with you an article that has been published in Spanish webpage Instituto de Estrategias, Strategy Institute. The Geopolitical Disputes of the Cyberspace is the title. According to Ignacio Ramonet, the New World System is characterized by multiple strategic ruptures, which meaning is difficult to elaborate. Many recent crises are linked to the new technologies of information and communication, ICTs, with dematerialization, generalized digitalization, and the explosion of social networks. The gap between the abundance of information and the scarce access with abundant claims dynamizes the formation of new social groups instantaneously and reproduces the radicalization of criminalization. We have to read this in full, more slowly to understand. There are essential elements in this article called the Cyberspace Political Disputes. Our recommendation is in the research webpage Misión Verdad, called The Commercial War Between the United States and China is Not What They Told You. During the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China in October 2017, Chinese President declared that China should be world leader in innovation for 2035. In 2016, China had launched the first quantum satellite in the world, which since then has been used for a video call with quantum ciphering between China and Europe. The Chinese army and defense industry can use advances in quantum radars to compensate the superiority of the U.S. Army in concealing technology. This is also important, and we will analyze this in our third segment. 21st century of the Cold War. How does cyber espionage work? What connections are there between Israel, United States, and Great Britain? Have we moved from the Cold War to the Cyber War? Which connections are there between the U.S., the U.K., and Israel? These are questions we will try to answer after this pause. Cyberspace, Cyberwar, 21st century disputes is our critical move today. I would like to add what has been published by geopolitica.ru, a Russian webpage exclusively devoted to geopolitics, from the Cold War to the Cyberwar. United States and Russia. It has very interesting examples. In 1999, in the Kosovo War, almost 500 specialists in informatic matters interfered Allied computers, NATO, and Milit's U.S. airport. In 23, Taiwan received an attack that included virus and Trojans, and the responsibility ended to be suddenly on Chinese strategists. In 2007, Estonia suspects Russia for a series of attacks that to banks, means, and government institutions. In May 2012, in the Middle East, one of the most damaging malware were discovered called Flame or Skate Wiper that affected Iran, Israel, Sudan, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, among others. Since the end of the 90s of last century, this universe of cyberwar has developed quickly. Why? There's an emblematic example in the recent history that is considered an act of war, a centrifuge software. Let's see what it is. In the historic event, they say that as of the Second World War, United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand implemented Echelon, the highest program of espionage to intercept electronic communications reported by Winslow Pett, and in 2001 proved by the European Parliament that controlled 3 million communications per day. These five countries created a general communications quarter and identified with the slogan and justified the right to privacy. This program became a tool to monitor communications of non-U.S. citizens through their metadata and extended to companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Apple. The National Security had watched over the communications of 35 presidents around the world, including Angela Merkel, spied from 2002 to 2010, approved by Barack Obama. Edward Snowden said that 3 million communications issues from France were intercepted since 2002 to 2013. The collection techniques with anti-box and way-to-box techniques on 2010, one of the most damaging instruments of cyberwar was detected in Belarus, capable of entering industrial systems. And as experts say, this is an attack of day zero, appealing to vulnerabilities of manufacturing. It was a huge multinational move between the United States, Great Britain, and Israel. Students has affected several countries, but the main was discovered in Iran, especially in one of the main nuclear plants of Iran. The contributions of things, the matters we are discussing, we will discuss with Harold Arcos and Damian Fossil, both experts in the matter from Caracas and Spain. Thank you for being here. The experts assure there is a world network of surveillance with clearly defined political and economic goals. Harold, I would like to ask first if with the cyber war, the weapons are expanding to key stadiums.
Así es, gracias, Lucía.
Yes, thank you,
Bien,
Lucia.
muy bien el resumen que
The
acabamos de ver,
summary we just
justamente lo
saw
que
is very
sería
good.
estas intervenciones. Ciertamente lo que se conoce como los
What is known
sitios,
as the Five
y ahí vamos a
Eyes,
empezar a entender los
and we're
usuarios del
going to
mundo por qué
start
Canadá tomó
understanding
su lugar.
why Canada took the lead of the cyber war that was developed for a long time, as we have seen. Canada is part of this band, International Spionage Band, or Canada, UK, and New Zealand, together with the United States. This is the efforts of intelligence of each of these countries to carry out what they were handling in former global confrontations like the first two wars. Let's remember that after this short revolution, new geopolitical strategies are being imposed beyond having a control, a monopoly on world economic dynamic. By controlling this, an industry and the daily life of each country is being controlled. The weapons industry saved the economies of these countries, so-called industrialized, and the new economies move around technopolitical corporations, and of course these as instruments to change geopolitics in the world. Let's remember that geopolitics and this search for conquering new spaces, not only physical and technological, but through these cybernetic instruments, they seek to have all the necessary stock of the so-called, we will call them cannibal economies in countries that can guarantee all minerals to sustain the industry. As you said, well, this new cyber war is changing the geopolitical dynamic, and of course what we just saw, the kidnapping, intervention, detainment of the administrative responsible, the hire of Huawei, that responds to one step ahead in this strategy. They are not only limited to cyber laboratories, inventing viruses and controlling certain industries. Let's remember that they have had disastrous results with nuclear plants in the past, but they want to give a stronger step by arresting a civilian member of a corporation. And of course, as all countries are accustomed in their diplomatic ways, China has also researched and have certain elements of Canadian officials. So we are witnessing a new phase which places us users and that should not only call our attention as an interesting news, but also motivate us to the search of knowledge to help us make moves, because to this point, citizens must also be more informed. This is why we thank spaces like Telesur to discuss these topics. Regarding the Huawei case, before giving the floor to Damian, I would like to ask you, are these informatic pirates that a state or another power group contracts or trains? How is malware contracted to attack banks, financial houses, or military spaces? It is no secret that many of the global contractors, including the other guest Damian has attended conferences called hackers meetings. There's also a space where governments recruit these skills. But today, in the reconfiguration of this new trend and this new panorama and scenario, we must remember that several armies around the world already have cyberwar departments. Not only for research, it's not to apply I and R. No, it is to act in strategies and war programs against countries that are deemed a threat. Let's remember that there's a country that believes that all the planet is against it, and that is what the United States is saying constantly. It would seem that they're always seeking for commercial allies to keep these programs. How does it happen? Many parts of the staff is trained at very high levels and have access to very powerful infrastructure. For a common user that reviews the email, probably is not aware that the entire planet in the submarine bed is crossed by tablets, but they are not placed there just for the planet to communicate in goodwill. This is a cable that means money, somebody manufactured. And this industry of great capitals is moved to have access to other spaces. So obviously it is necessary to keep the industry for which states and cyber war departments must exist as they do. A very clear example of this is the Snowden case. That was an officer that worked for the entire infrastructure and who only under personal motivation managed to exceed this infrastructure and understands that as a human being brings this information to the light and allows all the users of the planet to access information that many knew but was not evident. To make it evident, it's very important because it reveals the real intention of how they operate. Let's remember that the cyber world, as the popular say, facilitates knowing what happens in the digital world. And governments use these strategies to attack. This happens every day. As the summary you just presented said, it has been happening for 1 decade. Once they pass to the next phase of technological tools like internet. This is how these groups operate in huge penetration strategy, software implantation that are in your personal computers or laptops, waiting to operate remotely to take information and make social intelligence. And as we have learned, it allows governments like the United States to use this information. The information that has been placed, like the case of elections, is a clear example. Lots of global information is handled, and this not only happens because a person filled a survey in a social network. No, not only because of that. It happens because there's an active search and persecution of the data of users around the globe to take geopolitical decisions. This is why these cybernetic development units are fed with it. This is evolving, as I said very quickly, because technological evaluations are also going fast. So,
así como en el pasado,
as in the
apostábamos
past,
a las
we
luchas
bet
que
on
mantenían nuestros derechos
struggles
civiles como
for
una
our
prioridad
civil
en la agenda
rights as
pública,
a
pues en la actualidad,
priority.
como
At
ciudadanos digitales,
present,
debemos
as
mantener
digital
nuestros derechos
citizens, we
civiles y humanos
must
como
keep
prioridad en
our
la agenda
human
pública
rights
internacional también,
on
y no que esto se
the
violente
international
de manera
agenda
flagrante como
without
se ha venido
and prevent
haciendo
the
y pues no haya una
violation as
respuesta
they have done
contundente de nosotros
without
los ciudadanos.
a response
Gracias,
from the
Harold, por
citizens.
este tiempo, por esta reflexión.
Thank
Quiero
you,
ahora sí
Harold,
darle
for
la
this
palabra
reflection,
a
and
Damián
now
Fossi,
I'd like to give the floor
informático
to
conectado
Damian
desde España,
Fossil
que
from
está esperándonos
Spain,
desde hace un
who
ratito.
is
Bueno,
waiting
Damián,
for us
para
there.
entender los actores
To
involucrados,
understand the
quiero
actors
preguntarte
involved,
respecto a
I
lo
would
que
like to
pareciera
ask
ser como
you
un carácter
what seemed to
elitesco
be
o exclusivo de este
an
tipo de guerra, en el sentido de
exclusive
que quienes pueden disputarla
place of
tal
this
vez
war
sean muy
that
pocos. Quiero saber tu
very
visión,
few
porque pareciera
can
que hay muchos
participate
estados
in this
naciones
war because
rezagados
it
porque no
seems
tienen
that there are
avances
many
tecnológicos comunicacionales
state
en este
nations that
sentido.
don't
Primero con
have this
eso y luego
development and
tocamos
just
otros
remain
tópicos
back.
pendientes.
Bueno, hola, bueno, gracias Lucía, saludos
Thank you,
Harold,
Lucia.
saludos Latinoamérica. Bueno,
Greetings,
el desarrollo, así
Latin
como
America.
lo puso Harold en
Well,
su
as
disertación,
Harold just
todo
said,
desarrollo viene con
every
una
development
industria muy
comes from
importante
a
que es la
very
industria de
important
las armas, la
industry,
industria de
which
la
is the
guerra.
weapons, the war
Internet, el
industry,
GPS, ya
and
son
GPS.
dos inventos que realmente
All
vienen
the
ya en sí para el tema del
inventions
ciberespionaje y el
that
tema del SAT, los temas de
are
localización. Pues
for
bueno,
location and all
llegaron a
systems.
impulsar, o sea, todo ese desarrollo logístico llevó a esa inversión, por lo menos esa inversión que hicieron en la guerra, llegan a tener un trabajo muy grande para llegar a todos lados,
Reached
utilizar
all
todas estas
places,
herramientas.
and they
Mira,
use
si es
these
elitista, yo creo que
tools.
también es
You
porque
ask if it's an
estos países
elite.
también tienen una visión
I
un
think that these
poquito
countries also have
clara de cuál es su hegemonía, porque
a
realmente
clear vision of their
si, bueno,
hegemony.
si queremos tener una hegemonía, si queremos llegar a todos
If
lados,
we want to
si
reach
queremos
everywhere,
bueno, desarrollar,
we
también
want
ellos tienen
to.
una selección de talento, ellos están detrás de las personas que
They
son
are
brillantes,
behind
hacen
people
llegan a lugares donde en otros
who
países,
are very
ejemplo, como la
smart
India, es un país
in many countries like
muy
India,
grande, es sumamente pobre, vamos a decir así, entre lo que la mayoría de los
and
habitantes, pero tienen
has
una
the
industria
majority
muy
of people
alta,
who
tienen
is poor but has a
unos
very
desarrolladores
highly
que son
developed industry
altamente capacitados para
with people
desarrollar
who are
cualquier cosa,
highly
y también
trained
unos
to
talentos.
develop.
Europa también busca talento en
Europe is
cualquier otro lado,
always also
Latinoamérica, África,
seeking skills like Latin
como
America,
ustedes
Africa
un
as
poquito
well.
más de su análisis, bueno, ellos buscan también un talento,
They
también,
also
también que tienen.
are seeking
Entonces,
for
básicamente, sí,
skills.
es lo que impulsa esta cosa, a pesar de que eso
This is a
también
war
es
imposed
dicen que
by
no,
the
que
capital,
es desarrollado también por la gente, por las personas, por los civiles, por la gente
and
de las
some people say that internet was created by the people, by university or civilians.
allá ellos dicen que un poco de protocolos que son importantes para la vida, pero todo está impulsado.
But all this is promoted by
Ahora, Damián,
capital.
en un informe del 16 de octubre de 2014, Naciones Unidas,
In a report of
emitido por
2014,
Naciones Unidas, quiero decir, se lee el ciberespionaje
you
masivo
can read the
por
massive
violar derechos establecidos,
cyberspionage
la
for
tecnología de
violating
acceso a granel
established
es
rights
indiscriminadamente corrosiva
is
de la privacidad
indiscriminately
online y afecta a la
violating
propia esencia del
privacy and
derecho
affects the
garantizado en
essence
tratados
of rights
internacionales.
guaranteed in
Sin
international
embargo, sí es
treaties.
verdad que se identifican delitos de espionaje
Nevertheless,
cibernético, no obstante, estuvimos
we
revisando
were
en el equipo de
reviewing
investigación y pareciera que ningún
and it
tratado
seems
del
that
derecho
no
internacional
treaty of
fija condenas.
international
Y yo
law
no sé si tú tengas algún dato al
sanctions
respecto
this.
que
I don't know
diga
if
lo
you have any
contrario. En
data that
2011 y
says
2012 llegó a
the
hablarse
contrary.
de
In
la llamada
2011,
ley SOPA, pero
2012, they
fueron
talked
muy
about the
grandes los
SOPA law,
cuestionamientos,
but
intereses
questioning
encontrados, empresas
interests,
como Google, Facebook, Twitter,
companies
YouTube
like
y
Google,
Wikipedia
Facebook, YouTube,
hicieron profundos
Wikipedia
cuestionamientos, como decía, y
questioned
redes de hacker como
this, and
Anonymous
hackers
lanzaron,
like
digamos, toda
Anonymous
una artillería pesada para
launched heavy
impedir
artillery
que esto
to
llegara a
prevent
buen término,
this
digamos, para atacar a
to
los promotores,
be
a quienes auspiciaban esta ley. Una reflexión sobre esto en estos minutos que nos
issued.
quedan.
A reflection in a few
Pues
minutes we
mira,
have.
fíjate que básicamente se persigue siempre a los hackers.
They always, individual hackers are pursued, or people who
o que quieren realmente dar ahorita en este mundo muy conectado, quieren dar su voz.
people who want to give their voice. The countries. For example, we have a problem here in Mallorca because there was a journalist that revealed some information about a huge corruption in Spain, and a judge withdrew his mobile because he wanted to know his sources. These things happen, and the Spanish Constitution defends privacy, and the journalist exercise is defined in the Constitution, but this has been violated. Many things like this happens with politicians. They don't understand.
Básicamente no están junto a lo que se desarrolla realmente el desarrollo del Internet. Estas personas de casa, esos universitarios, esas personas que están también colaborando.
There are people at home and universities who are contributing to develop the development of internet and have a more open view. But there are others who don't, so and there's a war of powers. We are going back to the Cold War, and before internet, you could be anonymous, but right now you have to expose your life to a network. And people in Sevastopol could know what you're doing. Thank you very much, Damian and Harold, for accepting our call to reflect
Hasta pronto.
on this
A
matter.
nuestros invitados de este segmento, en términos tecnológicos, nos preguntamos por qué
We ask
la República
ourselves
Popular
why
China avanza
the
tan
China is
velozmente,
progressing
cuál es su
so
hoja de
quickly,
ruta,
what,
cómo ha definido esto
how has
como
it
una línea
defined as
prioritaria
a
de su plan
priority
de
line
desarrollo
of its
y
development.
podría dejar incluso rezagado a otras
And
potencias o
could it
rezagadas
even
a
leave
otras
other
potencias.
powers
También
behind?
importante saber si tecnología es control, acaso eso
If
explica
technology is
ciertas acciones
controlled, does this
sutiles de
explain
ataques
some
sistemáticos de
hostile
parte de Estados
actions
Unidos.
by the
En
United
esa línea
States?
avanzamos en nuestro análisis
We'll
sobre esta
answer this
profundización en la
in
política. No se
our
vaya, pausa, ya
next
volvemos.
segment.
La detención o el arresto
The
de la
arrest
connotada
of
directora ejecutiva de Huawei,
the
Meng
executive director of
revela que hay otro
Huawei
nivel más en los
reveals
choques
that
entre
there is
Estados
another
Unidos.
level
De la
between
guerra
the
comercial
clashes
a la guerra
between China and the
tecnológica,
United States, from the
a la guerra
commercial
high-tech plantea
war
ella.
to the high-tech
Vayamos a
war.
un punto fundamental
Let's go
entonces,
to an
el impulso
essential
y la
matter,
estructuración de la industria tecnológica. Son dos escalones del plan
restructuring of the
Made in China
technologic
2025.
industry
El
and
gigante
the
asiático quiere liderar también en
2025
el campo
Made
de
in
las
China
tecnologías y las
plan.
comunicaciones por
This
delante de
also
otras
wants
potencias como
to
Alemania, Estados Unidos o Japón.
take over technology and communications. In 2015, China announced an ambitious economic and social plan based on the developing highly complex technological industry, which was called Made in China. That has 15 large centers for 2020, 2040, 2025, accompanied with educational and professional programs and spaces to disseminate research and new technologies. The context is the operation of a plan to reduce extreme poverty and inequality by increasing investment in technology, strategic centers, automatization of machines and robotics, airspace industry, equipment and ship with high technology, airline transportation, alternative energy, equipment for generation of energy, agri-technology, medical products, the president said that this technology would be one of the main pillars of developing China. This is how artificial intelligence is now a key factor for a highly technological industry. China has advanced in giant steps and exceeds in the United States in publishing industrial patents and intellectual property, and therefore the growing concern of the most conservative U.S. and European actors. This technical development is addressed to promote innovation beyond what has been made in the West. Currently, China is a leader in imagery, translation, robotics, and vehicles.
En estudio nos acompaña Jack Bravo.
We have Jack Bravo, Masters in Latin American Political Economics and Digital Economy. I would like to ask you first, according to what we were listening, if this progress with this plan made in China 2025 is subject of fear for the United States. What is the giant Asian achieving with this? China understood that to be big in the world context, it had to develop its own technologies, leave dependency with the United States, and started to use technological spaces. China understands now, even when in the 19th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party they debated that technology is power, but also very important economic metrics considering these digital scenarios. The fact of big data is they discuss how to potentiate telecommunications. China understood that its role as a power is related to one of those spaces that the United States has left aside. Because even if the United States created Internet, we must also consider that this declaration of war by the United States made by Donald Trump in September 2018 called the National Strategic Plan, where he says that United States must recover the cyberspace and accuses China of one of its enemies, like North Korea and Russia, and even Iran. So there is a war to monopolize the technological market of telecommunications. Yes, of course, because the data theft and looking at users as production matrices, how each company's GDP is contributed, calls our attention because Huawei has exceeded Apple as one of the main smartphone suppliers, where most trade, where it has greater weight and influence, because Huawei has a large a share in market in the Southeast Asia, Latin America, and even Australia. This somehow is exceeding the United States, even in Europe, where Apple is very strong. The arrest of the Chinese Huawei official and the U.S. Request for extradition is violating essential rights of a Chinese director. Is this part of the disputes that are taking place in cyberspace? This other dimension of war? Yes, of course. It's a political error by the United States, a diplomatic mismovement, because when they were about to sign a truce between both presidents to lower tensions around commercial sanctions, they arrested Mei Wanshu in Canada. In fact, she is the vice president of finance of Huawei. It's like comparing that there would be the daughter of Steve Jobs would be arrested. So from dialects, they pass to action. Now, all the roads lead to Iran. And why do I say this? Recently, according to Canadian justice, they learned that Mei Wanshu had a PowerPoint document with 17 slides where they talked about a trade plan with Iran through Skycom.
¿Y qué dice la justicia norteamericana? Porque John Bolton
And what does the U.S. Justice say? Because John Bolton said that Donald Trump was not informed of the arrest of the Chinese official. And he said that in Canada they say that they didn't have a political connotation. But we all know how these moves are made, where there are sequels, in this case of Huawei, because Orange, the most important French telecommunications company, prohibited the prohibition of 5G equipment, Huawei equipment, and because they believe that these contribute to cyber espionage. Now, we don't know if it's a pressure of the Pentagon or the White House to try to weaken Huawei. That is not only Huawei, there's also Xiaomi, another company. But what is the crime? Is this a threat to the U.S. national security? I remind you that when George Bush, after 9/11, he said that whoever's not with us is against us. In this case, whoever violates our cybersecurity is against us. So in this case, when the United States when Donald Trump separated, left the agreement with Iran, everything related to cooperation with Iran is considered a crime by the United States. But beyond that, in September 2018, they talked about recovering the cyberspace by the United States. In the fact of recovering sovereignty, there's also digital finance. The United States has noticed that business is always there. Besides natural resources, if we see the case of Venezuela with Petro, and this is why the United States is vetoing Petro, supported on natural resources, because Latin America has an important reserves of lithium that is very important for electronic devices. And so there's a very important connection, and it has to do with this rise of China with innovation. Xi Jinping made a route for 2025 to become a world leader in innovation, and they reviewed their 5-year plans where they're talking about machine learning, big data, and how artificial intelligence and quantum communications, which is very important. Besides the Beidou navigation system that, as compared with Russia system, has left the GPS aside, nations like Venezuela and other allies are looking at supporting their sovereignty with these navigation systems. You were talking about Russia. I would like to also talk about this other actor that also has his tools in technological development. It is no secret the problems that Russia and the United States have had after the elections where Donald Trump was reelected. And Barack Obama accused Vladimir Putin of hacking informatic systems of the head of campaign of the Democrats and Hillary Clinton Foundation. This unleashed an international conflict, and I want to ask you about Russia. Russia is another essential actor, especially in the military topic. We saw on the World Cup that there were they made some kind of special internet to protect it from hackers in this World Games. Russia is also betting on these disrupted technologies, but it is more about sovereignty, more focused on commerce, trying to shield their security systems when they were accused with Cambridge Analytica, when they were accused that Russia had hacked it to position people against Russia, especially radicals, to weaken or try to conceal the rise of Russia in the economies and technology is an essential role. Russia is developing biotechnology, nanotechnology, and especially the GLONASS system related to navigation security is a very important system. Talking about Barack Obama, according to Edward Snowden, in 2009, Barack Obama had been spying on China and especially Hong Kong. And students and businessmen in Hong Kong and also in China. In the case of Russia and China, they're trying to shield their finances, their security system, because in this bet on a multi-plural and multi-centric world is also the de-dollarization of the economy, which also shows the new reality related to crypto assets. In order to have safe transactions, they must also have standardized cyberspace and regulate cyberspace. Because I remember malware WannaCry that affected finances in Europe and the United States. So they are vulnerable, and they have to see how much they can shield this with this related to virus and malwares. Harold talked about something very important. Cables could be associated as military bases that the United States could have. We must look at this in this way because they are placed in strategic places for cyber espionage and that kind of pressures. To understand the magnitude of these new cyberwar weapons, do they have, they can leave entire towns without utilities. I would like to talk about nitrous or nitrous Zeus that the United States had planned against Iran in a study made by Misión Verdad, who says that the United States was preparing this operation containing a broad implantation of electronic devices in Iran's electronic networks to erupt in services in the large amount of territory, which would also eliminate another way other than direct confrontation with the United States. This alternative did not take place. How is there a connection between the cyberspace geopolitics and those that identify as disputes in traditional places? This is not as physical, but the impact damages are collateral, and they say that all roads lead to Iran because in the end it was Iran the goal. For the United States, if it commands Iran, it will command the Middle East. And this happened in Venezuela with PDVSA informatic brain, how the United States had informatic influence in the country's main industry, and Venezuelan resistance hackers avoided the damage to be more important. So this is gives us an idea that the last bullet that these powerful nations can shoot is the cyber war. That would affect the daily life because we are all accustomed to internet or digital network. Internet as a political factor. Thank you very much for being with us. The title of the research I was talking about is U.S. Cyberwar Explained Through a Documentary. We will now go to our conclusions based on what we have exchanged. It's a complex but vital topic. Cyberspace is a matter of dispute of power, control of finance, communications, marine and land communications. Some countries understood to be powerful and big, they have to control the new technologies in communications and information. And we know that those who dispute power violate law and don't care about violating those legal instruments as in the traditional geopolitics. The system is designed to their service. The battlefield exceeds the web and the deep web, as Michael Hayden, former director of the CIA, confirmed during the administration of George W. Bush. We're talking about a strategic tactics that no one can ignore in the 21st century. Many have cyberwar departments. We will have other chapters on this interesting topic, and we thank you for being with us.